Hello, everyone. Mr. Lipchick here. Our discussion for this segment is going to be issues in economic development. Okay, less developed countries, or LDCs, often have difficulty developing because of deficits in the factors of production. Natural resources are not spread equally throughout the globe. Shortages of farmland, water, and other things can inhibit growth. Only 10% of the Earth's land is arable or suitable for farming. Poor farmland, a lack of rainfall, and few mineral resources have created problems for certain LDCs. And sometimes an LDC will have an abundant natural resource base, but will lack the technology or capital to develop them into goods. A lack of physical capital, that is, the human-made resources used to create goods and services, is a problem for LDCs. And a lack of physical capital perpetuates subsistence agriculture, which in turn prevents industrialization. Some things we take for granted, like tractors, may be non existent in parts of the world. So some countries turn to foreign nations for investment capital, but this comes with its own set of problems. A lack of human capital, that is, the skills and knowledge gained through education and experience, is also a problem for LDCs looking to develop economically. In an industrialized economy, you must have individuals with the skills to operate modern technology and manage businesses and governments successfully. And a lack of human capital or failure to invest in human capital discourages other countries from investing in LDCs. Health and nutrition are important factors in the development of LDCs. Inadequate nutrition or malnutrition causes a large number of people to have physical and mental issues, lowering their productivity and therefore harming the nation's economy. Many countries suffer from epidemic diseases due to climate, and this lowers the average life expectancy. And when a society has a lower life expectancy, it is difficult to establish and maintain the governmental and educational institutions needed for a higher level of development. Education and training are critical to moving an LDC into the developed world. Low literacy rates, which are common because of subsistence agriculture, however, keep the LDCs from developing economically. Individuals who do manage to acquire education often leave to make more money in industrialized nations. This is called the brain drain. Some countries, limit this by requiring their students to come back and work for a number of years before they can leave, but it is nevertheless a problem because individuals act in their own self-interest and the interests of their families. Immigration policies in developed nations encourage the brain drain. Many will only take skilled and educated applicants. Okay, the United States is definitely a country that does that. Also, there is serious inequality in the education of women in many LDCs, basically depriving the economy of half of its human capital. Frequently, women in these countries have children at an early age. Cultures in some LDCs limit job opportunities for women, and women are paid lower wages in areas that they do work in. Some cultures devalue women and do not develop their potential. Also, the colonial histories of many LDCs often impede economic development. While they were colonies, these countries were forced to give up their natural resources to industrialized European rulers. Europe turned them into manufactured goods, which they sold back to these peoples. And this has caused a historical resentment of European-style government and institutions, making economic progress very difficult. After World War II, many nations overthrew colonial rule, but were underdeveloped because of their many years of life under the rule of these Western nations. After their colonial periods, many LDCs adopted centrally planned economies in order to industrialize more rapidly. And while this worked in the short term, long term economic growth was harmed. Also, political corruption is an issue for many LDCs. They do not have a long tradition of democracy. Okay. Many of their political leaders have authoritarian powers and keep much of the nation's wealth for themselves and their friends. And efforts at land reform in Central America, for instance, have been hindered by corruption and illegitimate governments that took power by force. And a good example of the corruption in Africa would be Mobutu Sese Seko, who plundered the treasury of Zaire, impoverishing his entire nation. Also, political instability is a problem in the economic development of LDCs. Africa is plagued by civil wars because the rival ethnic groups in the former colonies fight for power. The countries that they inherited were created by the colonists and do not reflect the many tribal identities. 800,000 Rwandans died in the civil war that took place between the rival Hutu and Tutsi tribes. In Latin America, many countries are run by authoritarian governments that have been supported by the United States. This has led to communist uprisings and political instability in many of them. And economic development is difficult in such an environment. Because of their difficult histories, both in seeking to develop and trying to provide necessities for their peoples, LDCs have taken on serious levels of debt to foreign nations. The strength of the US dollar at different times has made it difficult for the LDCs to pay back their loans in their own currencies. Debt to US and European countries has been a barrier to economic development in Latin America, for instance. Some countries, unable to pay back their debts, have nationalized foreign-owned businesses, and this creates a very uncertain climate which discourages foreign investment. When a business is nationalized, basically it goes to public ownership, and the company loses everything it's invested. So this has led to a reluctance of foreign business to invest in Latin America. Lesser developed nations happen to be suffering the most from climate change as well. And droughts, rising sea levels, devastating storms are all impacting them and setting back their efforts to advance economically. Okay, if I could leave you with one thought, it would be that countries are less developed economically for valid reasons, not because they're inferior in any way. Historical events and different pressures put them in that circumstance. And if we are going to trade with them, that can be a beneficial thing if it's done appropriately. Okay, that concludes our lesson for today. Thank you for coming, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Have a great day.